So Trump has decided to stop sending aid to Ukraine. We'll talk about what that means. In response, many countries have, or specifically European countries, have decided to sort of step up, which we'll talk more about on the reality show. On here, we'll talk about more specifically does I think a question that has been floating around, even among some objectivists, is that basically the way Zelensky maybe should have been acting, and maybe what was Trump, or sort of what is does Trump really want? And so there's a lot of sort of uncertainties that I want to cover today. Joining me today is James, and so, James, what do you make? Well, first of all, let's just cover this sort of stopping of aid. This is, it has to be reminded, this is not the first time Trump has did something like this. In 2019, he stopped the military aid from going into Ukraine when he wanted to pressure Zelensky into investigating Hunter Biden. Now, there was an impeachment attempt over that by the Democrats, which I believe didn't succeed. And then, even during the Biden administration, one sort of aid package for Ukraine was delayed by, I think, 8 months by Republicans, mainly because, or at least I think mainly because of Trump's pressure, since support of Ukraine was a bipartisan issue pretty much from the start, and I think only became an issue once Trump got involved. Now I'm supposed to believe that Trump wants peace in Ukraine. And I still cannot really see that. Now, James, what do you make both of the stopping of aid and sort of Trump's recent actions?
Well, I think it's now clear that the Friday meeting disaster was a pretext for doing just this. Well, Friday was a pretext for Monday, wasn't it? And it was a setup. I mean, international leaders certainly. I mean, Zelensky was there willing to sign the deal. He's still willing to sign the deal. He was always willing to sign the deal. And it was comments
Yeah,
that he made.
sorry to jump in. I'll just mention because Zelensky has just a few hours ago, basically again, sort of reiterated that he still wants to make a deal,
Again,
that he's sorry, or well, I can
regrets the
read
way it
specifically.
happened.
Yeah, regrets
To
the way it
demand an
happened.
apology from a world leader is wrong, and nor should an international agreement hinge on a personal apology to anyone. If a deal that makes sense for the world makes sense for the world in America, it should never hinge on a personal apology. It should never hinge on anything. If as a lawyer, I had an agreement worked out with someone, and they were willing to sign on the bottom line the deal, I'd let them foam at the mouth with disrespect if I would get them to sign on the bottom line. I'd seen world leaders meeting in the Oval Office or meeting in one of the drawing rooms of the White House, put up with a lot more. Yes, yes, we'll cover that. Blah, 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 blah. They would have papered over any other talk because he was willing to sign the deal. He's still willing to sign the deal. No, it was a pretext, as I suggested. And as I suggested, there'd be an apology, or as close as we can get to it, from Zelensky. So just as I said on Friday when this all happened, this is really all theater arranged by Mr. Trump. And listening to Republicans defend the whole situation and jump on it. The Republican commentary on Fox today was really rather reprehensible. It said, will Zelensky ever say the A word, apology? Well, wait a minute here. An international agreement should never hinge on a personal apology to Mr. Trump. And for Mr. Trump to demand respect from world leaders when he had just called Zelensky a dictator, sort of denied that he ever said it, but he blamed him for causing the war. He calls Trudeau Governor Trudeau of the 51st state, and Republicans to say, oh, well, you got to respect Mr. Trump. You can't disrespect Mr. Trump. It is really sad and sorry that this is all hinged on Mr. Trump's personal glory. If he really cared about ending the bloodshed, he would have started the procedure, gotten the deal, the minerals deal that he wanted. Now, see, I'm not defending the minerals deal. I'm not saying that Zelensky even should have signed the deal, but Zelensky was willing to do so. It is absolutely obscene what's going on. It was clearly, in my mind, a pretext for cutting off, as they did on Monday, the aid. It went that far. And what did Trump say it hinges on? An apology. an apology to him, a personal apology to the leader. Now, can you imagine any serious agreement hinging on the need for a personal apology? No, what you do is you sign the deal and you continue talking. And you say, well, that's still a subject for negotiation. If you're serious about it, Trump has friendly words for every dictator on the planet. They're strong. I respect them. They're smart. What has he said about Xi? What has he said about Kim? What has he said about Putin? He's had nothing but praise for dictators. Does Trump even know what a dictatorship is? I don't know. Trump has never made a statement that makes it clear to me that he understands what a dictator is. Maybe he thinks it's just raw, pure democracy, but it isn't. I mean, I'd remind you, and side note, Hitler and the Nazis were elected into power. It is not a matter of democracy. It's a matter of respecting rights. But Mr. Trump doesn't understand the American Constitution. He doesn't understand individual rights. For all I know, he doesn't even know what a dictator is. But you'll notice when he tried to take back his comment calling Zelensky a dictator, but not Putin, he said, well, I can't imagine myself ever saying that. I use that word very carefully, he says. Oh, so it was a strategy to insult Zelensky before you were trying to sign a deal with him. Now, that's not smart diplomacy. No, it's all disingenuous on Mr. Trump's part. He's appeasing his far right, which never wanted the military support in the first place. But once upon a time, way back when he was critical of Mr. Obama, he said, hey, well, I'm sending military aid to Ukraine. All Obama did was send blankets. Well, if it was justifiable to send military aid then it's the moral thing to do now. But no, part of the problem was that Biden's policy was to help Ukraine. And so anything Biden has to be negative, and it has to be Mr. Trump getting the glory for, quote, cleaning up Biden's mess, et cetera, et cetera. That's the turn that Mr. Trump is perfectly willing to make. He wouldn't know a moral principle if it bit him in the behind. Now, to my objectivist friends who are very distressed at this, and it is very distressing, what Trump is doing here is immoral in the extreme. It is not a moral foreign policy. I just remind you of the last 100 years of American, quote, diplomacy. Can you imagine? Ayn Rand fled the Soviet Union and came to the United States. And early in that experience, back in the 1930s, the president of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, normalized relations with Stalin's Soviet Union. And that inaugurated a period of trade and investment that helped build up the Soviet Union under Stalin. Before that, we helped build up Germany for the Nazis. Oh, and in the early 1970s, something I can remember, Richard Nixon went to China. Nixon went to China, as the famous saying goes. Only Nixon could go to China. Well, yeah, because he was a Republican. But look at what that inaugurated: trade and investment. It with Mao, Chairman Mao himself, China. And you note what has happened over the last 40 or 50 years in terms of building up China. America, each and every time, morally sanctions, economically supports its own enemy at the end of the day, creates its own enemy that it'll eventually have to fight. And of course, Trump is perfectly willing to cut deals with Putin and so forth. And he knows to get a good deal with Putin, he's got to insult Zelensky, blame Zelensky, et cetera, et cetera. And so now you've got Putin saying, oh, well, I'll help you negotiate with Iran. Well, there's another dictatorship that I'm sure Trump is perfectly willing to negotiate with. And maybe he'll let the dictator Putin help be the, arbiter of our, quote, dispute with Iran. Can you imagine anything more morally offensive than that? No, we sanction America. Trump is particularly disgusting in this regard because at least former American presidents rhetorically would understand the difference between what a dictator is and what a dictator isn't. As far as I'm concerned, Trump has never exhibited any awareness of what a dictator actually is. All he does is show them respect, and Putin in particular. But as I predicted, Zelensky is saying, I regret it happened that way. And he was always willing to sign the deal. Always. He was willing to sign the deal on Friday. And if the signing of the deal was the important thing, as I say, if I was negotiating a deal just as a lawyer, I'd let the other side foam at the mouth with irrelevancies or things that I would talk about later or things that I would disagree with even later. But Zelensky's in the right here. Zelensky happened to be giving the correct history lesson to Mr. Trump on Friday. We were the ones invaded. We were invaded twice. Putin breaks every ceasefire deal. Putin breaks deals regularly. And so, no. So for telling truth to power, in effect, to Mr. Trump on Friday, he was kicked out, booted out of the White House rather than sign the deal. And it's now apparently aid itself. And see, it was all a pretext for cutting off the aid yesterday, wasn't it? As it turns out. And the aid won't happen until and unless I get a personal apology. If giving aid to Ukraine makes sense for international safety, security, peace, etc., that it should never hinge on a personal apology. Now, I don't think you ought to be dealing with dictators. Okay, I would approach the whole thing quite differently. I would have let Zelensky attack in Russia much sooner. I would have been giving Zelensky much more powerful weapons to deal with this problem. I would make Putin cringe and crawl if there were going to be any kind of agreement. But no, Trump wanted to humiliate Zelensky on Friday as a pretext for cutting off aid, which apparently now hinges on a imagine an international agreement of any kind, hinging on a personal apology to him. It's despicable.
We have a super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much, and a super chat from Christian, thank you so much. He says, Ukraine was never allowed to win. Many stupid restrictions were imposed, like not fighting on Russian soil. So I am in favor of a deal, but I am deeply in shock over the lies by Trump Vance. Now again, I think the most important point is, as long as Ukrainians are willing to fight, you support them morally and materially. Why is it for us to decide, no, that is enough? Imagine, like I made this point already, and I believe also Jeroen Brook has made it, but I came up with it on my own. I didn't take it from him. Basically, imagine if the French, Spanish, or the Dutch said, oh, come on, Americans, like, how long do you want to fight against the British? How long do you want to, continue fighting? No, as long as there is will, as long as they want to do it, we do support them. Again, this is not some altruistic sort of thing we are doing for them. Russia is our enemy. Russia is our direct enemy. Is interfering in our elections. Is helping attack international shipping. Is allies with Iran, North Korea, threatening Western and sort of Eastern democracies like Japan and Taiwan. This is absolutely as much as we can. And the fact is that we haven't recognized it really. We still trade with Russia. We still engage with Russia. Something I want to talk about on the reality show is there are still Russian frozen assets that we could technically, take. No one's really
Ukraine
stopping us
deserves
that much.
restitution. And insofar as the West is holding any kind of Russian money, it seems to me that money should be given to Ukraine, not back to Putin, the invader, the aggressor who caused this whole thing and attacked in a major way twice. They put Kyiv, in the capital in Western Ukraine, under siege 3 years ago, if we recall, ladies and gentlemen. If it was in America's interest to give Ukraine more than blankets, Mr. Trump, as it was in the beginning of your first term, right? Then it's still in America's interest. Trump wants to deny that there is any self-interest on America's part for Ukraine to fight Putin and to stop Russian aggression in Europe. No, we have a real interest, a vested interest. We have a vested interest in keeping Europe safe and the world at peace and Russian aggression at bay. And if Trump can't acknowledge that we're getting something from the deal as well, then why the hell is Trump even considering the deal? If it hinges, as I say, on a personal apology to Mr. Trump, then what the hell are we even doing the deal in the first place for, Mr. Trump? Your personal glory? It's despicable. It's truly morally despicable. But as I say, this is not the first time America has morally sanctioned and materially supported some of the worst dictators and creating our own enemy at the end of the day. I mean, Trump is morally building up and pumping up and creating a stronger Russia for the West to have to deal with down the road, isn't he?
Someone says you guys are sounding like warmongers. Yeah, when it comes to fighting dictatorships, yeah, I monger that war. You do stand up to dictatorships. You do stand up to evil. You don't allow, and this is again in our self-interest. If Russia knows that they can invade a country like Ukraine. They can bite out a chunk of it, and use the arguments, and then we use arguments such as, well, what about third world war, what about nuclear, like these are questions that Putin should be asking, not us. He's engaging in this. What about his worry about world war?
He
What about
are
his worry about nuclear weapons? Like, why there is no a single time when Putin is in a tough position, when it's on him, like, well, I can escalate the situation, but I might start a nuclear war. No, he knows that he can do whatever he wants, and we will always be the ones that will be like, oh, but we don't wanna escalate. We don't wanna like engage in this. He should be put in tough position to deal with that.
peace. We are the ones advocating peace. We're not the warmongers. As I pointed out, it was America in its economic support, material support for Germany that helped give rise to Nazi Germany. It was our material support of the Soviet Union that helped give Stalin so much power. It was our material support of China that created the enemy and rival it is today. China did not develop all on its own, my friends. The Russians did not develop on their own. They developed, and we created our own enemy. We created the great threat to war that they would become. Let me back it up even further. You know, back before World War One, the British government was run by the Liberal Party for a while. The prime minister was a guy named Asquith. And Asquith, when, you know, people were talking, well, you know, the Kaiser is building up a war machine in Germany, and maybe we should build up a response to deter the Kaiser from doing something like invading Belgium. Those people were called warmongers too. The people that thought that Britain should militarily keep up with the Kaiser's Germany before World War One, they were called warmongers. But had Britain built up, that might have deterred World War One from ever happening in the first place. If America had taken a clear moral stance when it came to the Soviet Union in the 1930s, we would not have been building, or an alliance during World War Two, we would not have been building up our next enemy to fight after the Nazis, worldwide communism. And look at what we did in China. Nixon went to China. And so if you're really in favor of peace, what you don't want to do is appease aggressive dictators, which is what we have been doing. By appeasing, this is more like Neville Chamberlain saying he's achieved peace in our time. If you reward Putin for his aggressive invasion, then you're going to get more invasion. If you really want world peace, then you need to stop Russian aggression. And it's Russian aggression that we're talking about here. And that's what everyone keeps missing. It's not Zelensky. His people are dying. There could be no leader, there could be no people in the world who more want peace in Ukraine than the Ukrainians. For us to lecture them about wanting peace when it's their own civilians, their own women and children, it's women and children in Ukraine who are dying. And there are no American boots on the ground right now. And if you want to avoid having other boots on the ground taking this, then you appreciate Ukraine fighting this war against Russian aggression for Europe, the sake of European security. What you don't do is sanction and reward, as Mr. Trump seems to be doing, the acts of an aggressive dictator, unless you want to end up in history looking. I mean, I don't know what the future is going to bring, but if you sanction Mr. Putin's aggressive actions here, you're going to get more of it. It's going to be more like a Neville Chamberlain situation, my friend. No, we're not the warmongers. We're the ones trying to stop and prevent, just as in the case of Israel. What you do, unless you want a perpetual war, you take care of the problem and you take care of it decisively as America in World War II, when America did finally get decisive about things, as we took out, Tojo's Japan or Hitler's Germany. You take it out, and you take it out permanently with extreme prejudice. Now, I'm not saying that we should go to war right now with Putin, but right now the people fighting Putin's aggression are the Ukrainians. And so what you say is, thank you, Ukraine. Thank you for fighting Russian aggression. Thank you for deterring an aggressive dictator and saving the security of Europe. You're doing now I know they're fighting for their own freedom and they have the greatest self-interest in doing that, but there's no conflict of interest here. We would also say, it's that win-win, like you were saying last week. Thank you thing, because America and the West are getting something from Ukraine's valiant fight against a dictatorial aggressor. It was Putin who has twice in a major way invaded Ukraine. To what? To the sanction of America and the West, to the turning the blind eye. And now Trump is the one turning the blind eye. And that does not bode well for world peace, my friends. No, as you point out, they've got North Korean slave soldiers now fighting doing their dirty work in Ukraine. It is Iranian drones that are helping them do that. This is the axis of evil that is being appeased here, as it was once called, the alliance between the worst aggressive dictators on this planet. If you want peace, you don't appease that.
We have a super chat from Christian. Thank you so much. He says, Daniel, the problem is Ukraine hasn't enough soldiers. It seems not enough men still want to fight. And now without US help, they are doomed. Again, that's for Ukraine to decide. It's not for us to force their self-interest or sort of what they want to do. As long as they want to fight against evil, you support it and you stand behind them. You do, like Putin and Russia, there is not a single thing that was ever demanded of Russia. There's not a single concession. Again, reminder, I think there are specific regions, like Russia is still controlling about, like 20% of the thing.
Ukraine. Yeah.
They formally annexed Crimea, they formally annexed Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. So all of the sort of like south of Ukraine formally annexed, meaning that's part of Russia. And Russia has said they are not giving that up. We are giving currently Russia everything they ask, everything they want, and we have no demands. There is not a single thing we are demanding of Russia. It's all for Ukraine should, like, this is blaming the victim. This is like both, even when it comes to sort of how long this war has been going on. Now again, the war, as sad as it is, 3 years is not that long for a war, and that's sad. The fact that people are dying is sad, but the fact that this is a blame on Ukraine, or the fact that, yeah, fight for freedom is sometimes tough, especially if you don't have the full support of your allies. But, you know, James, you have been a prosecutor. Imagine saying to a victim something like, "Oh, this trial, it's gonna take years. Don't even bother. Why even try it? We don't really have that much evidence. We don't really."
Every time we've appeased a dictator, we've said we were being, quote, realistic. You know, we're being realistic, but be realistic about all of reality. Russia cannot sustain it either. Russia is having a hard time too. Russia was thwarted in its attempt to take over the whole of Ukraine. It put Kyiv under siege. Russia is now having to use North Korean troops. It's not as though Russia, if properly handled, was 10 foot tall and insurmountable as an enemy. But the point is that, as you point out, we're taking the side of the bad guy. Trump is blaming the victim, Ukraine, for, quote, starting the war. He's calling Zelensky a dictator. Well, I never said that, he said. I use that word carefully. Well, he never uses that word against real dictators like Kim and Xi and Putin, who have all kinds of aggressive, certainly Xi and Putin have all kinds of, and Iran, think of that, have all kinds of aggressive intentions. And he's the one calling aggressive dictators men I respect, strong men, smart men, good men in various ways. I've got a good relationship with that guy. I've got a good relationship with this other guy. No, it's that kind of moral sanction that is surely going to cause war at the end of the day. You have to think long term, people. And if you're going to be realistic, you have to be realistic in the long term as well. This is not the path to peace, to totally give Putin anything and everything that he wants at this point, now that the Ukrainians have done a good job of at least restricting the damage. And it is them fighting this war. It's not us. So they don't just want to die. Okay, they don't want their civilians killed, right? They're the ones who are fighting this war, as you point out. But secondly, Trump has to acknowledge that America has a self-interest here. If he doesn't do that, then why is America doing any deal? Why did he think it was good to send more than blankets, 7 years ago or whatever it was? Yeah, They talk out of both sides of their mouth, and it's all about Trump's respecting Trump properly. Can you imagine, as I say, any international deal of any serious deal of any kind hinging on the apology that Trump says that military aid to Ukraine now hinges on a personal apology to Trump?
Uh,
Astonishing.
we just have a few more minutes, so I'll just read one last thing. A Christian member in the chat says Ukrainians are free to decide, yes, but the US is free to help or not. There is a choice to make for both. I would be very careful about this sort of way of thinking. Like, yeah, we, especially as objectivists or sort of as capitalists, we do sort of advocate for free choice, but we also advocate for you should be judged for your actions, and there should be a certain not duties but sort of moral responsibilities, moral accordances. When you see injustices being done, when you see your self-interest being threatened, not doing something is not virtuous. It's not well, he has a free choice. Yeah, everybody has, and you should make the moral choice, and there should be moral choices being demanded of people.
Britain had a moral choice, didn't they? I mean, let Hitler take Sudetenland, let him remilitarize the Rhine. Okay, and look, they had a choice. Well, they could let him have Poland, they could let him have France, they could let him have Scandinavia, they could let him have the Balkans. Let Hitler have whatever Hitler wants. It's a choice. It's a choice. It's a choice that would be suicidal, obviously, in the long run. Had Hitler secured the continent of Europe, you think he would have stopped there? And I would indicate the same. Mr. Putin has said explicitly that the great tragedy of history was the collapse of the Soviet Empire. He has said implicitly more than once that he wants to reestablish, in effect, the Soviet Empire, it being the greatest tragedy in recent history as far as Putin is concerned. His aggressive intentions are clear. If it is a threat, NATO membership is not a threat to anyone except someone who has the desire to invade, a would-be invader, an aggressive dictator. Only dictators need worry. Only aggressors need worry about a defensive alliance. And those kind of security guarantees that are going to be required for any lasting peace. If that's Mr. Trump's goal, the security guarantees that Ukraine needs are obviously key to a lasting peace. But how are they any different than what Mr. Trump says caused the war? Just discussing Ukraine joining NATO. Wouldn't the very security guarantees that are required to make sure this is a lasting peace be the very same, quote, justification for war that Putin had in the first place, Mr. Trump, or that you yourself have argued was the provocation of Russia for this war? No, if Putin didn't want to take back over Ukraine, it would not. He would not have He would not have invaded it and expended all the lives and military expense that he invested in the invasion of Ukraine. No, Trump is an aggressive. Putin is an aggressive dictator, and Trump was saying that Ukraine brought it on for wanting security guarantees. Well, there can be no lasting peace if you demilitarize Ukraine and not give them security guarantees, which is what Putin's demand is. No, Trump is setting up another war, more war, rewarding aggression, sanctioning an aggressive dictator. And if that is the formula for peace, my friends, we have a very different opinion about the long run and what real peace requires, and what would help create a future world of peace. No, you have to fight. You have to fight when you can an aggressive dictator, or you're begging with both hands for more war.
So we're out of time, but we will continue following this on the reality show, as well as most likely in the upcoming days. There's still not much happening in Israel. There is still basically there is a sort of stop in aid going to Gaza, possibly even cutting off water, which is great, should absolutely happen. And there is a sort of a deal on the table, but also Israel might re-engage back into Gaza. So as soon as that happens, we will cover it. But until then, not much is happening in Gaza. And this happening in Ukraine, I think, is big and deserves coverage at the moment. With that, thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you on the reality show in just about a minute or so. Thank you,
Yeah.
and bye bye.